It's really wonderful to be here today, quite an honor. And I was really looking forward to this conversation because, as you all know, we're at this moment where AI has gone well beyond experiments into deep implementation, AI agents, and beyond. And the question, one of the pressing questions that I know we share in our day-to-day work is, how do we scale AI with trust? How do we make sure that as we scale productivity and wonderful gains and wonderful scientific advancements, that it doesn't come at the cost of individual privacy, data rights, and so on? And so I'm super thrilled to be joined here by Caroline Louveaux from Mastercard, and we're just going to have a great conversation. So maybe I'll just start by saying, well, first of all, maybe you can describe your job.
Yes, absolutely. I love to have that chat, just the two of us.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So my job is to look at data and AI end to end, to make sure that not only we comply with all the laws and regulations, but to be honest, that we also aligned with Mastercard's values or principles, because at the end of the day, using data and AI responsibly goes way beyond regulations. It's all about trust.
I agree. But you mentioned regulation, and I'm curious how that factors into your work. So there's a diverse and, in some sense, fragmenting regulatory landscape. You're dealing with everything from GDPR to India's emerging privacy framework, which is very exciting. How do you operate sort of cohesively globally while also accounting for the particularities of different geographies?
That's a great question, Paula. Thank you so much. And you're right. Mastercard is a global company, right? We are active in more than 200 countries, so we're truly global.
And some crazy volume of transactions, right? Is that right?
I think it's 150, right? Don't ask me the numbers.
Okay.
Crazy numbers of the transaction every single day. And you're right. Actually, one of the key challenges that we face is regulatory fragmentation. As we know, and as you know, the GDPR has had a lot of babies around the globe, but each baby has its own flavor and its own personality. And so we end up with really a patchwork of laws and regulations which introduce complex and fragmented standards. I often call it the alphabet soup of digital regulations. And of course, we talk about privacy, but also digital identity, cybersecurity, AI, open banking, all the banking regulations. So the list goes on and on and on. And to be honest, the soup gets spicier every single year. And then, of course, we have also a lot of chefs in the kitchen because many regulators want to regulate data and AI. And depending on who is going to take the lead, you may end up with very different outcomes because they pursue different objectives. So how do we handle? That's a question. I'm going to give you a recipe with 3 ingredients. So the first one is that it's really imperative to have a global set of principles that act as your North Star. And so at Mastercard, we have established data and tech responsibility principles that really guide everything that we do with AI and with data. They're very easy to understand for non-experts. And so it's really great to demystify the topic and to instill that culture of responsibility across the company. The second ingredient is, of course, to make sure that your principles are operational. And so we've developed a single global framework to embed these principles into the life cycle of all our innovations from day one. And actually, back in 2018, we've decided to take the GDPR as the baseline or the foundation to design all our innovations globally. And over the years, of course, we adjust the framework to embed local requirements. But our product teams, they like it so much better to have just one framework, even if it's a strict one, than having to deal with a multitude of local rules. And then maybe the third and last ingredient that I would like to give is that technology is also part of the solution. And we are exploring privacy-enhancing technologies. For example, clean rooms, synthetic data, homomorphic encryption. All these technologies that enable data to be collected, used, and shared so that we can extract the value from the data while fully preserving privacy and confidentiality. And there's a lot of actually potential in this area. I'm happy to share more stories later on.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So first of all, deft weaving of the recipe analogy throughout. Well done. But, you know, I think you said principles, and then you said take the highest standard, apply it globally, and then use technology to help govern technology, which I also, I mean, I resonate with all of that in my work as well. And I think Salesforce has done the same. We've taken GDPR and used it as our global standard. And our customers are very happy with that because they know that it's a high standard. And so I think that's very wise. I also think one of the challenges in this day and age when we're talking about data protection and then operating with trust globally, for example, thinking about, it's been very inspiring to be at this conference and thinking about the scale of operationalizing AI in India, the diversity of cultures and languages to operationalize in, and then think about how do you operationalize trust across that diversity. Any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think the principles remain the same, but you're right. I think what needs to be localized or may need to be localized is some of the controls and the guardrails to make these principles fit for purpose, taking into account the local regulations, the cultural differences, the multitude of languages, the digital maturity also of the population. And so, for example, take the principle of transparency. It may mean different things depending on who you talk to. And so how do you make sure that what you do with AI is really understandable and explainable to everyone? And I think that's really relevant for India. Another principle, as we know, is fairness. How do we make sure that all these populations, the whole population, is represented in our training data sets so that the AI outcomes are fair, inclusive, and so that the AI benefits everyone? So these are really hard questions. And so I think actually it's really important to keep that in mind. And it requires partnerships. And for example, Mastercard, we partner with a number of ministers and think tanks, etc., in India to make sure that we equip people with what they need to navigate this space really safely and to make sure that they're equipped to navigate this stage.
Amazing. So I'm curious, you said you'd been at Mastercard for a number of years. So you've seen this story before the current AI wave. And I'm curious for your perspective of sort of before and after. Like, how has this wave of AI changed how you've seen questions of privacy and data protection? Is it different, or do the same general principles apply?
Again, I think the principles do not really, and to be honest, if you want to have good principles, they have to be future-looking, right? You cannot change your principle every year. I think actually that what makes them really powerful is that they stay irrespective of the technology, the law. So I think that's really important. Now, how these principles are being interpreted and how to make them operational, that may change and evolve. It's not actually a change from one day to the other, but I think it's in evolution. And for example, when it comes to AI, we talk a lot about AI governance, of course, right now, but nobody has to start from scratch. I think you have to leverage what exists already, your privacy by design process, security by design, risk management practices. All of that can be leveraged and enhanced to have a proper and robust AI governance program in place.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting, though, because I was thinking about this for Salesforce. We started our AI ethics program around a decade ago. And we had a set of principles that were based on our corporate values. But then when LLMs started becoming mainstream, we had to have like a set of operational values for this wave of AI because, for example, the issue of accuracy, there's always an issue of accuracy, but all of a sudden it heightened in importance in this wave, right? We didn't think about it quite the same way when we had deterministic AI. But now that we're not, you ask the same question, get a different answer the second time, it becomes all the more important. So it's just interesting to see how the core principles remain the same, but then you sort of...
I fully agree.
Right? Another question.
Maybe I can start to ask you questions.
Ask me, well, you're welcome to. I was going to actually go back to what you said about using technology to govern technology. And for an enterprise, the astonishing scale of Mastercard, I just would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it makes even more sense in the context of AI. So, of course, we all know that AI can bring huge benefits for everyone, for people, for society, but let's be honest, it also lowers the barrier to entry for cybercrime, right? Actually, think of how easy it has become to generate deepfakes and to trick people into sending money and data to fraudsters. It's a really global issue, and I've just actually heard that there's a recent research study that has been made and that estimates that more than $1 trillion was stolen by scammers just in the last 12 months. So the issue is really huge. And so what do we do about that? I think actually that AI can be part of the solution as well. And so at Mastercard, we have been leveraging AI for decades to make our network safer and more secure. For example, we use AI to make sure that you are who you say you are when you make a transaction. We also use AI to detect legitimate from fraudulent transactions. And then recently, we have been leveraging Gen AI techniques that have helped us improve the accuracy and the speed of our fraud detection tools by up to 300%. So AI is definitely actually something that can help there for fraud, but also AI can be helped to detect what it is personal information in a data set, can help detect if there's model drift. So I think technology is definitely part of the solution. It's not the only toolkit, but it has to be part of the solution.
100%. And it's very, very interesting because I think there was a time when technology governance was just about policies that you could sort of write down and then have legal consequences for. But if we're not using, in some sense, governance is code now, and code is governance, and so it's just a really interesting paradigm where these worlds are blurring together. I also wanted to ask you, and this is a question near and dear to me. I'm curious if you get this, I often get people asking, well, how do you make the case for trust? How do you make the case for doing things the right way? And, well, I'm not going to give away my answer. I'm curious what your answer is.
I can't wait to hear yours, but let me start first. It's a difficult one, of course. It's not the only way, but I think transparency is a cornerstone to that trust. People simply want to understand what's going on. You know, what data is collected about me, how it's going to be used, by whom, why. Very simple, but so hard to answer. And our digital economy has become so complex with so many different parties. Technology is moving so fast. The laws are becoming incredibly complicated. They ask companies to publish lengthy disclosures, which, to be honest, doesn't always help. I don't know about yours, but my mother has no idea about what's happening behind the data, behind the scene with her data. So I think as an industry, we can probably do better to explain, what is the value exchange, and to start actually telling them, what's happening, how they can keep control. And so that's something that actually, and also, the big question is, does transparency vary depending on the country, the audience, the use case? I'm going to continue. So for example, for us, it wouldn't really make sense to give very detailed information about how our AI fraud algorithms work. We would simply give ammunition to the fraudsters to game the system. So this is something that we're working on with other companies, and I'd love to hear your perspective to see, okay, what would good look like here?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, so Salesforce, we create technology, particularly AI agents, that help businesses in a lot of different functions, basically better serve their customers, right? So in marketing and sales and customer service and beyond. And when someone asks me like, oh, you're the chief ethical use officer, how do you make the case for this work? Not to say that there's not some case that's made for the work, but what I always say is, like, when I talk to my customers, this is the #1 question they ask. They want to know, if I'm using an AI agent, how do I know it's going to do what I ask it to do? How do I assess whether it's doing the right thing when it's doing millions of transactions and I can't review every single one, similar to your fraud transaction question? Like, there's no way that a human could review all of the cases of fraud at that volume and scale, right? That's a task that only can be done by AI, but under human supervision, which is really fascinating to me. But in some sense, I think this age of AI makes it such that, at least in our business, trust is what makes for scale. Trust is what makes for adoption. And if people don't know how to trust AI, they're not going to use it. So to me, there's not actually a conflict or a tension.
No, absolutely. I think actually for innovations to be adopted at scale, trust is everything.
Yeah. So I'm also curious, and I think we're going to be joined by Rob at Meta.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm told. I'm curious. You know, as you think about applying the partnership between the United States and India, and what you've been hearing at the summit so far as it relates to trust and AI, anything that stands out to you?
Let me actually get a question to you. You know, what do you think?
Well, I mean, a whole bunch of things have stood out to me. I think a lot about, I think about trust in two planes, at least. One is I spend my day job working across our product suite, testing it, making sure that we have a set of features that our customers can use to understand what's going on. For example, let's say you're using AI for customer service, and you have a customer that's very angry, and you don't want, let's say they say something rude. You definitely don't want the AI to repeat back something rude, right? And so we have a toxicity filter that helps companies sort of set what level they want to set there for how the AI behaves. It's that kind of thing. I spend a lot of time on that kind of thing, testing for fairness, et cetera. But increasingly, I think that the challenge and the opportunity of our time for enterprises around the world is not just a technical challenge, it's a human challenge. It's about how people and AI work together. It's about how do you set the system so that the AI agent in that customer service example hands it over to the person at the appropriate moment when they're going to have a better interaction with the customer. They're going to be able to resolve a problem that the AI could not resolve or could not resolve as effectively. And then the human has to hand it back. And it's this question of human-AI partnership. And I think a lot about that as sort of the management challenge and opportunity, and how do we create systems that really account for that? Because that's really trust. And what stands out to me and the opportunity in India and the Global South is just like this a massive, incredible talent opportunity. And this idea of like, here's this incredible, like, you've got digitally native cohorts that are, you know, chomping at the bit and are able to sort of reinvent how work gets done, but reinvent how work gets done so that people are doing things they could never dream of before, and how you embed trust in that. That's what sort of stands out to me so far.
I fully agree with that. Actually, talking about that, I think, and people are clear about that, but I think we can still do better. It's the need to, I often say that AI governance is a team sport. And it's really, really important to build a team, which doesn't mean that people have to report it to you, but make sure that the team has diversity of skill set, backgrounds, cultures. Big diversity is needed here. And I think this is still something that, in general, we're learning. In general, in the AI governance sphere, making sure that we can talk to each other and sometimes, understand each other, because we have each technologies speak one way, lawyers another way, policy people a third way. So it's going to be really, really important to learn how to work together to maximize the outcomes to get it right.
Yeah, agree. And I was also sort of curious, as you think about this in the context of Mastercard and sort of its operations here in India and think about sort of what AI is bringing, do you see that some of the safeguards need to be different here, or do you think it's the same? How do you think about that?
So that you know, actually, we have our AI garage, so our global AI garage based here in India, in Pune, with thousands and thousands of technologists designing the next generation of innovations for the world and conducting research and development in AI governance. So we have kind of India and the global south in mind for everything that we do. I think it requires tweaks, for example, in terms of fairness, making sure that our bias methodology works for the India population. So yes, we're going to need some tweaks, but it's not that, again, it's going to be a black and white approach.
That makes sense. I'm wondering, I have lots more questions that I could ask. I'm wondering whether we want to open it up for questions, or does anyone
feel free to ask questions to the moderator as well.
Does anyone have questions that they want to ask? None?
Then let's continue our conversation.
I guess so. None. Can you say more about the India Garage and some of the innovations that are coming out from that?
Well, you may have seen or not, but I'm going to tell you that actually we had our first authenticated agent-led transaction yesterday.
What?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So you can actually ask an AI agent to make a transaction on your behalf safely and securely with all the Mastercard brand, safe brands attached to it, which is fantastic.
Wait, okay, so walk me through that. So clearly you have to authenticate as a user.
So Mastercard enables these agent-led transactions, making sure that the agent is legitimate, that you don't actually face a rogue robot.
Yeah.
Making sure that your data is going to be tokenized, fully protected with the Mastercard safeguards, I'm going to spare you with all the technical details, but basically making sure that you can actually trust an agent-led transaction as if you were going to go to the store in person.
So it's a human using an agent.
You go to an AI chat, whatever it is, and you ask the AI agent to buy something for you.
That's
and
amazing.
You have shoes.
Amazing.
They're going to make some recommendations for you.
Okay.
And so then you can select. You can have a conversation with the chat, of course, with ChatGPT, Gemini. You decide which one. And they're going to recommend a couple of options to you, and then actually you decide. And you have, of course, the possibility to push the button and say, yes, that's actually what I want.
That is fascinating. No, and I think that as I think about that and think about some of the challenges that we're trying to think through, the next generation of challenges, right? So we have at Salesforce, we have a number of agents out on the market. We have a marketing agent, sales agent, customer service agent, commerce agent, similar to that. And I start to think a lot about the next generation of trust challenges, which are the agent-to-agent trust challenges, right? And
that
how
is the next generation.
Together. And I think that's where we really need an investment in standards. Welcome, Rob.
Time is up, Rob. Thank you for coming.
There we go. Just as soon as I got on the stage, they told me to get out. Well, thank you for...
Thank you, Rob.
It is good to be here. I learned a very valuable and sad lesson about Delhi traffic today, but appreciate your patience.
No, we're really thrilled to have you here, and we've been having this. Actually, I've been tickled because it's been a wonderful conversation, and we got to go pretty deep on a lot of different things. We were talking about.
We solved everything.
We solved it, yeah.
So we've solved AI.
We're done.
And privacy.
Yeah, we're done. We're done with it's all solved, but, except for the agent-to-agent part. But well, I mean,
maybe you can solve it for us.
So, I mean, largely we've been talking about the challenges of operating with AI with trust at global scale, regulatory diversity, cultural diversity, and so on. I know these challenges are not, you're not a stranger to that at Meta, and you also have a fascinating role. And here you are in India at this summit. Talk a little bit about that. How does it work when Meta is thinking about protecting privacy and protecting trust and data and so on, and you're operating in this the context of such diversity of language, of culture, and so on. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's a really interesting, and actually just as we were coming over there, my colleague and I were talking about why this aspect of what we do is interesting. And I joined the company 14 years ago to work on privacy. I came as a part of building up our first privacy program. And so this idea of trust that I know you guys have been talking about is really foundational. And I think anytime you introduce a new technology to the world, whether that's social media, whether that's artificial intelligence, trust is so critical, because the reality is people will only hire us collectively as an industry to do the jobs that we are trying to do for them if they feel that if they feel confident that we're going to do it well. And so I think one of the things that has been really interesting is both the need to understand the different cultures, the different legal requirements, and all of these kinds of things. Because for my company, and I think both of your companies too, that operate globally, understanding the diverse needs of our community is important. So for us, what that looks like is we actually have a comprehensive, what we call regulatory readiness program, that we use to sort of understand when there are new legal requirements, when there are new obligations that get passed, to actually split them up and figure out how does this requirement differ from what we've been doing before, and then split it up into different parts of the company, different teams that are dedicated to how we handle data minimization and data architecture, or youth privacy, or these kinds of things. But the other thing that I think is really unique about the moment that we're in is a lot of us, AI is so new. Even you talked about agent-to-agent communication, which I think is kind of the next big thing we're going to have to figure out. But I think the reality is, if you rewind 5 years before any of us had heard the words ChatGPT, I don't think anyone would have predicted the specific kinds of challenges that we're facing now, either when it comes to privacy or maybe even more significantly when it comes to just the way that we think about building technology. What are the questions that you should be thinking about to deploy AI responsibly? And so there's this other element that goes beyond legal frameworks. We have a bunch of different mechanisms that we use to try to understand what people want from us. And that includes formal advisory groups that we run. We also are doing a project with Stanford University now called, with a effort called deliberative democracy. It's basically taking broadly representative groups of people from India, from the US, from other countries, and asking them, what are your expectations about how this technology should fit into their lives? And then the sort of next frontier is, how do you take, and this is where we're doing a lot of research now, is how do you take the insights from laws, from deliberative democracy, from expert advisors, and actually translate that into technology?
That's really fascinating. And I think you're right that it's hard to anticipate all the unintended consequences of technology and the intended, it's hard to know what innovation is going to unlock in different ways at scale. And also, it's really important that we try in real time, because this is going so fast. At Salesforce, we do something called consequence scanning for that, like when we're doing reviews of different products as they're getting created, we talk with the team, like, what do you intend this to do? Hopefully that's in the product requirement docs. And then it's like, well, what might be the unintended, and then how do we anticipate?
What could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And we also are humble because we can't really anticipate everything, but it seems very important. So it's really cool to hear about the broader experiments that you're doing.
That's where I think actually, to jump on that, I think that's where it's interesting to have that outside-in perspective, because sometimes when you discuss internally with colleagues, you may just think in a box, and it's good actually to have independent perspectives actually to chime in, because they may see other things that could go wrong.
One thing that I really like about the way that you frame that, what are you trying to do? What is the value that you think you're delivering, or that we think we're delivering, and what are the potential things that could go wrong, and how do we avoid those things going wrong? I like the framing of both of those. One thing that came up on a session that I was in yesterday, talking about healthcare and the role of AI in delivering health, particularly in the global South. it was really striking to me, as a person that, grew up as a privacy professional and has been spending a lot of time thinking about the role of data and AI particularly. It's very easy to get into this mode of saying, like, I'm going to spot all the risks. And that's super important. It's incredibly important because nobody wants to be putting technology out into the world that's harmful. But one of the things that I think was really acute in the discussion of the role of AI in enabling things like cancer diagnosis at scale, particularly in communities that don't have access to a radiologist, in giving mothers and children timely access to wellness information that's personalized to them on WhatsApp, like these kinds of things that just weren't attainable a couple of years ago. And somebody made the point, like, what's the risk of not deploying the technology? Because I think if you don't ask the first question that you asked, then the answer is always no, we shouldn't do this. But then you're actually leaving certainly a lot of value for the people that you're serving on the table. But in that example, actually potentially like life-saving measures are left on the table.
Yeah, no, and these are really hard questions because you're right, it's a balance of risks, and the question is who decides and so on. And so I was also curious if you might talk a little bit about kind of thinking about all these changing global policy regimes. We talked a little bit about this fragmentation of policy, but how do you think about it? How do you operate within this kind of very dynamic policy environment?
Carefully. Look, I think we have a lot of experience in dealing with lots of different requirements in lots of different places. And so I talked about the sort of regulatory readiness process that we use to metabolize new obligations and make sure that we transfer them. The basic approach is, if there are requirements that we think are sensible and good privacy protections, good other kinds of protections, we generally try to deploy those globally. And so wherever we can, we go to instead of the least common denominator, the highest common denominator. Obviously, there are things that are specific to jurisdictions. You have to make a particular kind of disclosure in a particular place. It doesn't make sense, to make a disclosure about how we comply with European law here in India. That those things don't make sense. But in general, trying to figure out what is the most sensible thing that is the most protective for people is I think, a good baseline. I do think, though, the challenge is less how do you deal with lots of different requirements in different places. And because AI is so novel and the current iteration of AI is so novel, we end up in this space where there isn't just consensus, even among regulators, about what the law requires or what's expected. And so it becomes a more nuanced discussion about how do we enable a future that we all want when we don't know for sure what is necessary to deliver it.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we don't have a ton of time left, so maybe I'll kind of ask one last question of both of you, which is, as you think about this kind of a landscape of trust and AI and how trust can unlock AI at scale and adoption at scale, and we look at this incredible group of business leaders and entrepreneurs and so on, what sort of, what call to action do you have around trust and AI?
I think we need to build the future that we want, and that means being clear about what it needs to deliver, sort of similar to what you were saying about what do we want out of this technology. And I think particularly being here in India at this moment and hearing from a lot of businesses, a lot of developers who are using AI, understanding what you need out of the technology we are building, that's critical. And then also what you expect out of us when we deliver it. Okay. I think those things are important. And then I think actually like working together to deliver that future is going to be really critical. And a lot of the discussions we've been having at the summit are really about what does it take tactically, whether that's data set releases, whether that's evaluations, whether that's collaboration on policy frameworks. What are the things that we need to be doing together as a community and really working to deliver them?
Want to bring us home?
I'm going to build on that. Given that the technology is evolving so fast, and to be honest, no one has all the answers. No government, no company, no individual. The only way for us to build trust is to work together. share ideas, challenges, best practices, and create that future together.
Well said. It's a mic drop moment. Music to my heart. Thank you all, and please join me in thanking Rob.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Paula.